Thinking we're going to give it a little bit of after 1 o'clock would just hit, just let a few more people trickling in. But as folks are trickling in, if you are signed on and you have the ability to turn your camera on, we would really appreciate it so we can connect with you. And then also to rename yourself to your full name, if possible, on Zoom. That would help us out. So we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Juan Brandoni. I am a clinical psychologist and training director here at El Futuro. I say here, I'm at my home, as I'm sure you all are too. Thank you for joining us during this difficult time to our second, which we hope is something that our second of several that is something that we hope we can continue doing, which are these discussion or info sessions on the changing landscape and how to manage surviving and continuing to provide services in the new world of teletherapy.
Okay, are you on?
With COVID. And if you can, as you're joining, if you can mute yourself and turn on your cameras, that would be great. So here are just some quick tips on how to adjust your speaker and microphone. This slide might be becoming less relevant by the day as we all move into the teletherapy world and we become more familiar with this stuff. But if you need to troubleshoot your phone or video, you can hit those little carrots next to those items, those icons in your menu and hit the test speaker and microphone option. So a little overview for today's session. We are largely going to be focusing on general tips and resources for client engagement. We're going to present a few things that have worked for us from El Futuro and share some resources for folks out there. But really we want this to be discussion focused and really focused on you all and what you all have been doing. We're really hoping to learn from each other. So I've got a kind of separated out by discussion on how to engage child clients, adult clients, family, group therapy, or other services that you may be providing using the medium of telehealth. So why don't I just start off with a quick poll when I get an idea of where folks are at, where they're coming from. So Sophia's going to put up a poll for us here in a second. And I'm realizing now that we might have some people from out of state. I know one person who's a former colleague of mine, Jake King. So Jake, you can just put whatever suits your heart. He's coming to us from Pennsylvania. All right, so we have a lot of triangle folks, some Southeastern, some Triad, Southwestern, and some Western. So glad to have you all here. And then we have one more poll for you. Just want to know about what the context is where you all are working. So you can just select that and then we will publish that. It's always good for us to get an idea of where folks are coming from. think we can go ahead and publish. There we go. Also, nice spread. Got some school-based service folks, which is great. Curious to hear about how you all are transitioning your services in particular. And then we have some folks from nonprofit, some larger health clinics. So I'm also curious to hear about how you all are changing your services. So please, when we get to that discussion, feel free to unmute and jump in on the conversation. So we'll get started with a few strategies that we have found helpful here at El Futuro, and El Futuro staff on the call. If I leave anything out, or if you want to elaborate on anything, please jump in and interrupt me. This is just something that we canvassed all of our folks, and it's based off of also these running documents that we've developed internally that we're having our clinicians refer to as they're working with clients. So kind of divided it up into pre, during, and I think connectivity is the other one. But pre-session, something that we're really grateful to our admin staff who have done an amazing job of coordinating with clients, getting them set up. Our preferred application is Zoom, so getting them up and running with that, orienting them to the process. I can't speak today. And then the one thing that's been pretty key for us has been limiting the steps to connecting as much as possible. So basically our process looks like this. Our admin staff get our clients to download the Zoom app, and then we text them a link to join the session, so that all they have to do is click that link. It'll pop up Zoom. They don't have to sign in or do anything, and it shoots them right into our session. We do also have the waiting room set up so that we can admit and ensure that there's privacy so that two people don't jump on at the same time, things like that. But we found that this kind of short circuits any kind of potential troubleshooting issues with getting folks on our calls. Curious to see with folks that are maybe using Zoom or other applications, what have your processes looked like? And I wanted to also share here, Sophia will put these in the chat, but these are just some access programs. So we know that some of the folks that we serve, unfortunately, don't have the capability always to join via Wi-Fi. So there are some discount programs through Frontier, AT&T, and Spectrum. Folks have to qualify, but I think it's income-based. But you can follow those links to see those resources and see if you can get your folks to jump on that. In terms of in-sessions, we find that introductions are really important. So we had a full session on the 101, teletherapy 101 about etiquette and tips, but really ensuring that folks are in a safe and secure location. This can get particularly tricky. I'm curious if you have any folks that work with domestic violence victims about how you all are navigating doing teletherapy or making sure you're staying in contact with your clients. Having double identifiers for new clients. We've started doing intakes recently, so making sure that we're talking to the right person on the call. And then really it's important to just provide psycho ed around teletherapy, and some of the things that our clinicians have found really helpful is just to normalize it. This is weird. This is weird for everybody. It's not what we're used to. And just acknowledging that and naming that, I think, can go a long way, especially with a new client or someone who might be uneasy about doing therapy in this kind of way. Always important to have a failure backup plan / also an emergency contact, in case someone becomes unsafe during the call for whatever reason. And then really trying to be careful about not troubleshooting tech for more than 5 minutes before switching to the phone. I know I've done this. It's not ideal, but you can spend a lot of time trying to make the video and the sound work. I know often I will get the video going, but we can't get the sound, so I will call them and just have the speakerphone going. So that's always something that's a good backup to have. And here is an infographic, so we'll put this in the chat for you all too, but it's something that we've been sharing with our clients. I'll zoom in. It's something that our staff created. It's in Spanish, but it's just kind of something that we send to them forget. I don't know if any folks from El Futuro can clarify this if we send it via email or text, or we make it accessible in some other way. But really, it just gives the basics about what to do to prepare for your session, depending on the context.
Juan, I can jump in and say that document is texted to clients along with the link of their provider, especially at the first appointment that they might have with their client over telehealth.
Thank you, Molly. And Molly is one of our clinical directors at El Futuro. So then in terms of in-session engagement, and this is where I hope we can get into a larger discussion with you all. One of our clinicians responded to our request for what's been going on in your sessions, and they talked about how that therapeutic silence is maybe even stranger, where it's more awkward when you're on video. And I think she found herself maybe not allowing enough of that space because it felt more uncomfortable on video, but that sometimes letting that silence happen on video is just as therapeutic as when you are doing it in person. I know I've done, for example, just anecdotally, I've done some prolonged exposure, and we get to those points where we're doing the exposure for trauma, and the client is really just sitting there sobbing, and it's difficult, but allowing for the client to have that space was really important in my sessions too. We also recommend getting creative. So we have this screen sharing, depending on, I feel like most applications have a screen sharing option, but it's great to, sometimes it can be hard to get folks connected to resources or to fill out forms and things like that. You can use the screen share and go right to websites and fill things out. You can share with audio and share videos. I know I did this with a mom because it's hard I'm trying to get folks to develop daily routines or daily schedules for themselves and for their kids. And sometimes it can be hard to send a daily schedule and say, this is how you might fill it out. But then there's a YouTube video that covers it really well. And we found a few in Spanish that do that, and just having that video play out and then discussing it afterwards is a great way to do it. I feel like Molly, maybe it was you who found a book that was read out loud for, I think it was Something Terrible Happened. I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, hi everyone, Molly Hayes here at El Futuro. So one of the things that we've been doing is creating a resource list for all of our clinicians of YouTube videos or books or different kinds of things that we can share with our clients while we're with them at Zoom. And so some of us who might be familiar with trauma-focused CPT, there's a book called A Terrible Thing Happened. And there are a couple of different recordings of someone reading that book aloud, and the pictures go across the screen. I can't remember if it's in Spanish and English off the top of my head, but I have found a couple of other resources for kids, like feelings books and how to get along with your friends. And so you can do one of two options. You can either read the book in your Zoom screen if you happen to have it at hand, but if you didn't bring all of your resources with you, using the resources that are available on YouTube has been really helpful.
Thank you, Molly. And I think this can be particularly helpful, like Molly was saying, to engage clients, also the case management side of things. We already spoke about that. The whiteboard function is something that I've used to decent effect. So I have taught the cognitive triad for folks. So hopefully you all can see this, but it should pop up there. And I was like, we have situations that happen, and then we put it through the prism of our thoughts, and then this leads to emotions, and then this leads to actions. And it really helped to have that visual for the client. And it's fairly simple to do these things using the whiteboard, and it can replace, some of the tools that you might use in the session. And so obviously Zoom has this. I don't know if other applications have it or not. But it's something, again, that you can get creative with that. fairly easily. There's a link here for a lighting, positioning, and etiquette webinar just from, I think, the Teletherapy Association. I forget the name of it. But it's about a 40-minute long webinar just on general things about positioning your camera, etiquette, general things. We covered that in our last info session, but just wanted to have that there. And there's the info session. So Sophia can put the links out for that too. But so that's some of what we've found helpful. Molly or any other El Futuro folks, if you wanted to jump in and share any other things that we've done or you've done in your work before we get into the discussion, anything that I've left out.
I'm gonna let Lynn go first.
I'm Lynn Tovar from El Futuro also. And one thing, just as Juan was talking about the whiteboard, and I just wanted to say that I've also really been finding that it's incredibly helpful to let the kids and teenagers that I work with have, like if they have, many of these functions actually have a two-way kind of thing. And so client can actually touch the whiteboard and make a little squiggle. And I've used it to either have them draw an emoji that kind of represents how they're feeling, or, you know, do their own kind of vision of a triangle. So it's definitely worth exploring in whatever platform you're using, because I've found that it's super valuable in terms of engaging.
Yeah, I agree, Lynn. I think I've played some Pictionary with kids where I have them draw something and then I guess what they're drawing. Just fun things like that, I think, can also break the ice a little bit. Go ahead, Molly.
I think one of the other things that we've really focused on and have found to be helpful, and I can imagine this might be challenging if individuals don't have a support team, but that first connection of getting the client onto the platform that you're using is really helpful to give as much hands-on support as you can. And like Juan was saying, we have a great administrative support team who's really engaging with each client on an individual level of helping them figuring out their specific technology and, you know, what is the button that they need to press so that they can hear and they can see the clinician when it's time for their appointment. We also were able to create a few multimedia examples of this. And so we have some videos that were created where it actually walks through how to do that, and we can text that out to clients. And then we also have some still images of like an iPhone. Usually the iPhone is the struggle for getting on Zoom with audio. So we have some standalone images of like, this is the button that you need to press if you can't hear, those kinds of things. That learning curve can sometimes be a bit steep, but once it's achieved, it's pretty easy moving forward. It's just continuing to remember to do the thing. We're also finding that multiple text with the link is really important. So having the link set out maybe in the morning and then right at the time of the appointment. And sometimes that needs to be followed up with a phone call. And usually that combination of reminders will hopefully get folks on. As the weeks are progressing, we're finding more and more people are able to attend their appointments without it being a huge disruption, which is great. But just really thinking creatively about how you and your team can work together to make those first connections happen. So that's sort of like how to get your client into your Zoom room, and then there's all the clinical components of what to do once you get there. I think creativity has been really helpful. It's been sort of fun when it's not feeling a little exhausting, but it's been fun to like explore around with Zoom and see what it can do, and explore around with some play therapy techniques. There's some great YouTube videos and things of that nature around ways to engage kids. It seems like kids sometimes have the biggest struggle. One of the things I've seen a lot of folks do is a scavenger hunt. So you have kind of like a bingo card of coping skills, and the kids can run around their house and like pick up objects or show you things that help them calm down, or where do they listen to music, kind of those kinds of ideas.
Thank you, Molly. So for these, that's kind of our what we've been working on here, but wanted to switch it over to hearing from you all, and I wanted to discuss together, and I think this can just be an open time for sharing, asking questions, commiserating around some of the challenges and difficulties we've had, or some strategies that you all have found helpful. We want this to be a shared learning space too. So I wanted to start off with child clients. I know this is something that I've found particularly difficult. I think to begin with, I'm not the greatest child therapist, but it's even harder when trying to engage and maintain the attention of a child on video. Then again, some of them are more savvy sometimes. So just curious how you all have found engaging with clients in your teletherapy work. And you can go ahead and unmute. I'd prefer if folks can unmute and share by voice rather than by chat.
Hi, this is Candace. I actually work with kids.
Sorry, we'll go to you, Candace, and then Marquise, we'll go to you next, if that's okay.
Okay, cool. So I am looking for some feedback as well. I work with kids 0 to 6. I have had some success in working with some over telehealth. I do like a family-based approach called Child First. And some things that we typically do are read a book in the session and do some type of activity with the child and the caregiver. And so I've adapted that to Child First by either having, or to telehealth, sorry, by having the book with me and physically reading it to them, or doing like a YouTube, like you guys said before, a YouTube reading of the book itself, and then having the caregiver like prep beforehand what they need. So like, say if it's a book about feelings, and then I have them have paper and scissors and a glue stick, and then them make their own like feelings monster, and then it's something like that they can do together where I'm just like watching them do that. So I found that to be particularly a helpful intervention. But with the kids that are like, I work with kids 0 to 6, and so some of them are like glued to the screen where they'll sit there and watch. And then I have another child with pretty extensive ADHD, and she does not like it at all. And we're actually coming to discharge, and I'm really feeling uncomfortable about discharging someone, not seeing them in person. So I was wondering if you guys had any feedback or helpful tips about discharging a little one over telehealth. So that was my little thing that I wanted to share.
No, thank you, Candace. And yeah, gosh, I can't imagine how difficult that must be. And yeah, I'm curious if folks have any thoughts, or if anyone's had the experience of doing a discharge during this time.
Candace, this is Lynn from El Futuro. I just wanted to say that sounds amazing what you're doing, and I'm totally taking ideas from you. So all that interactive stuff, that just sounds amazing. So thank you for sharing it. And I'll mute as we kind of consider about discharge kinds of issues.
Yeah, so check out, so I just want to show you this really cool book that I bought. And this has been really helpful. So it's like this little pop-up book, and it's a pop-up book about feelings, obviously. And so the kids have really enjoyed watching this video with like the different pop-up feelings. So I just wanted to share, this was one resource that they really liked watching over the video. So this is something that's really cool.
I don't know if this is just on my end, but okay, there, we can see it now. It was frozen for a good while.
Sorry.
What was the book called, Candace?
It's called The Color Monster.
Okay.
And it's just like the color monster is mixed up mess of feelings, and there's different pop-up feelings in the book that kids have enjoyed watching. And so this has been pretty helpful when working with my littles. Sorry, I live in the middle of nowhere and it's always not the best connection, so I apologize for that.
No, we just caught a freeze frame of it popping up. It looks awesome. So what do folks think? I mean, other thoughts on maybe the termination issues, or just, you know, the difficulties engaging? Anna Folkens, I think I saw you nodding and smiling when talking about ADHD kids who might be jumping all over the place and keeping their attention on video.
Yeah, that's been really hard for me. And we've been doing 30-minute sessions, like not going over that, and but just trying to find different ways to keep them engaged.
Yeah, it can be really difficult. I know my partner, she's an expressive arts therapist, and she's been getting pretty creative with what she does. She'll play, I don't know if she wants to come and share, but she'll play a game where they'll roll the dice, and then based on what number comes up, they have to draw that number of shapes, and then it becomes a scene. I'm probably not doing it justice. Do you want to explain?
Sure.
Um,
Can they hear me?
I'm not sure. Hang on. Go ahead.
They can.
Go ahead.
So, so I got this from a colleague of mine who's an art therapist. It's not my idea, but you take a die and you kind of go back and forth with the kid. You roll the die, and whatever number you get, you agree upon a shape that you're going to draw for that number. So if you roll a 5, you draw 5 circles, and you take turns with the kid choosing the shape each turn. And you start out from the beginning saying, we're going to create a monster, we're going to create a creature or an animal or something like that. And then you kind of end the game at a certain point, and based upon I usually do a feelings check-in at the beginning. So whatever the feelings check-in was at the beginning, we'll have that be their, you know, anger monster or their sadness monster or their sadness creature. And usually before talking about and processing the emotion, we'll let the kid add any details or create a background, and then we process the image together at the end, and then see, you know, what comes out of it.
Nice guest appearance. Go for it.
I'm kind of wondering from Candace what her concerns may be, and if like a possibility that occurs to me is to have a type of partial closure, so that, you know, the little one can obviously end the sessions, and then when these quarantines and the pandemic calm down, maybe reunite for like a final closure session in person. But just curious to know what Candace, what her exact concerns are.
Yeah, so my exact concern was, it was actually the child that I was talking about that really isn't interested in the video. And like we've been working for a year in family home-based therapy. And so I have been coming to the house and doing a lot of parent-child focus interventions with them. And she is not interested in the video, and it's like physical torture for her to sit there and then to, you know, tell her that we have to discharge and say goodbye. And I created like a little star chart with like the dates that we have left, and we count down every week. And so my supervisor thought about maybe having them create that themselves, so then that they could do it. I don't know if that answered your question. It's just challenging knowing that she's not really engaged over telehealth, and then we're going to say goodbye. It just feels uneasy to me. But that was my idea about what I would have them do. And then also, like, we typically, like, in discharge, we play with a dollhouse, and we like come to the house and we practice like saying goodbye and what that's going to be like, and then also think about what other goodbyes that they've had. And so I really can't provide those props because we're not even allowed to drop stuff off in thinking that there might be some transmission. So my supervisor thought about like thinking with the caregiver about props that they can use. Like, we know 4-year-olds have babies in their house, like little baby dolls that they play with. So thinking about using them to help her play about discharge and her and the caregiver do it together as opposed to me being involved. So that was an idea that she had. It's just, I always, there's tons of people on this call with different people from different disciplines. So I was interested to see what other people had thought about that. And I definitely like your idea of doing like having the discharge and then physically going there and doing the in-person goodbye. I think that would be meaningful. And I think the caregiver would be open to it. And even though I bill for it, I don't care. It would probably be a great idea.
I love that. Yeah, I think whatever way we can find those connections right now, or even if we need to postpone them, I think it's key to keep them. Marquise, I'm sorry, I totally forgot that we were going to go to you next. So if you don't mind, I think you need to unmute.
Actually, well, Candace actually gave some pretty good some ideas and interventions that we can use. So I actually supervise the visitation services for Wake County Human Services. So, and that's definitely one of the challenges that was mentioned was that comes from my team. The biggest challenge is having the children to stay engaged now. Now that we're actually holding family visitations virtually versus in person. So actually Candace and her ideas and the book, actually we were all in our text group just talking about it just now, just saying that those were good ideas to actually when we're having our pre and post conferences with the biological parents, that those are ideas that they can use to engage the children and actually use some of those interventions, those ideas. Yeah, so that was all I was going to say, so it kind of was answered already.
No, that's excellent. I think we're just happy to see those connections happening on this call, people sharing ideas and then, being creative. I think that's what we all got to do right now.
Exactly.
So I'm just mindful of the time, and I know we're wanting to get to a lot today in a very limited amount of time. I'm wondering if any other folks have thoughts on engagement or issues or things they'd like to vent about when engaging with children in particular. I'm wondering, I guess in particular, like something that has happened from my partner, some of the families where they may not be in safe environments. I feel like Emily Pulley's on the call from 30th Judicial District in the mountains, and just how do you all maintain safety for these children and these families in these difficult times?
Yeah, hey, sorry, I was eating my lunch while listening. That's why
worries.
video was off. That's definitely been a barrier for services with some. There have been some families where we've assessed that for now, beyond just quick check-ins via a call or a text, it's not safe to do much more at this time in the house. So just doing a check-in with the parent or check-in in regards to the child has been what we've had to do with some. Others, we've found creative solutions. I'm doing therapy with quite a few people in their cars. So also with barriers of good internet in their homes, driving to a place where they have better signal, and then also being in a safer place, being in the car. So those have been two ways we've gotten to at least continue some form of contact and support during this time with, those are specifically the families that have sort of an active situation of violence or risk of violence in the home.
Wow. Yeah, I know that the work that you do is invaluable, and especially in your area, Emily, because I know especially for our Latinx folks, there's not a whole lot of support in your area. So it's amazing that you all are still able to find creative ways to connect with them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's with more time too, it'll be interesting to see how I think we're confident we'll continue to find more solutions. It's encouraging just to hear the creativity and how you all are just sort of going with the pace of things, that I think as we figure out the new norm, you know, and stay connected to families, it'll continue to develop.
Thank you. So unless there are any other thoughts on child, I was thinking of moving to adult engagement and what folks' experiences have been with that. So to me, I don't know, I guess I'll just share mine real quick. Like, I've found it surprisingly not be too different. I mean, some people definitely are less comfortable with it, but some I actually find that are even more comfortable, or like my anxious clients are actually doing better because they're not having to go out into the world and engage with all those scary things out there. And they actually prefer it. I guess some of the difficulties we've like Emily's saying, I've used cars a lot to be our therapy room because a lot of times the folks we work with maybe don't have the room, or there's family all around. So keeping that privacy has been difficult, but I've been able to do, like I said at the top of the call today, like prolonged exposure with a couple of my clients where we go into their traumatic experience over video, and it actually works well. So find that relaxation works well because it's almost like you're watching a YouTube video guiding you through a relaxation technique. But yeah, just curious what you all have found challenging or successful in working with adults in particular.
Hi, perhaps what I have to say would be a good kickoff with working with adults. My name's Glenn Field. I work at the Office of Rural Health, and I'm the behavioral health guy here. So I'm not a therapist, but I provide a lot of information, I broker a lot of information for folks, especially as it relates to substance use disorder. And Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, the ATTC, Addiction Treatment Technology Center, they had the same conversation. A group of clinicians who were primarily working with adults with SUD, a lot of it group work, and you know, how do we engage people? And so there are a number of things you've said reminded me of what was said there. Some of what they called your role in the sessions, they called it, I love this, webside manner instead of bedside manner. And to talk about a collection of skills and probably more so awarenesses that you need to have when you're doing treatment this way, like your own body language, being still, not fidgeting, not eating, not drinking. Make sure that the background you have behind you is not distracting to people. A lot of them did say that people that were anxious seem to be doing better, as you were saying, Ron, in these sessions. A lot of them do group therapy of an hour and a half, and they found out they can't do that. So they're down to an hour, 45 minutes. Individual sessions, 30 minutes. And as I wondered, nobody was saying why per se, but toward the end they said that there was an agreement that this work is more tiring than in-person counseling. Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing you nodding your heads too. And please be aware of that, so that toward the end of the day, you're running out of gas, you're getting tired, you're getting distracted. Then you need to make adjustments for that. And You also need to be more aware of doing reflective listening and asking for clarification from people so that you're making sure you're hearing people the way you would want to be hearing them. I thought that was pretty good stuff. They are engaging people in exercises like you were talking about. I love that whiteboard idea. I will share that. They didn't say anything about that. Deep breathing, relaxation techniques seem to be, can be done well this way. They talked about being prepared before sessions. Many of them said, you know, I was just reaching my file cabinet for topics sometimes, but now they feel they need to be better prepared because the dynamics can be different if you're doing group online. There can be lags, there can be a loss of momentum, and you need to be prepared to reintroduce that. So things you can introduce virtually. And be willing to follow where the patients want to go if that needs to be done, which is just good counseling technique anyway. So that was the Addiction Treatment Technology Center, ATTC, and I believe the 5 points that I've just sort of summarized is on there. If you were to Google ATTC online sessions or something in that, telehealth sessions, you would find that kind of thing. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, Glenn. And I really resonate with what you're saying. I think this came up in our clinical discussion at El Futuro that you're just exhausted. Like a session might take like 30 minutes feels like 3 hours. And I don't know what it is about doing it on video that's the case. But then something that always has stuck in my mind also from our teletherapy guru here at El Futuro, Mary Elizabeth Rockers, she said, even if you have your clients scheduled back to back, it can be so easy to just stay here glued in front of the computer. So even if you have them back to back, make sure you take 5 minutes to get up off the chair, stretch, maybe take a breath outside if you can, before settling into the next session. And I've found that to be so key. Like I think on Tuesday I did 5 in a row and I was pretty dead by it, but taking those little breaks can be super helpful. Thank you, Glenn. What do other folks think? Other things they've found helpful or challenging when working with adults specifically? I'm wondering about maybe different age groups, different familiarity with technology that folks are dealing with out there.
I think for our end,
Hi.
one of the biggest barriers that we found with the adult clients is honestly the technology piece, but also the consistency. Now, with the visits being virtual versus being in person, but just consistency with it. And I don't know if that could be several different barriers for them not being consistent with maintaining those appointments, but it could be from just, fear of technology, of not being able to use technology or having a knowledge of it. Just being rebellious because of change. Not really sure what those issues are, but could be a number of barriers. But that has been one of our biggest ones, just really the consistency at this point.
Yeah, I think it's really tough, and that's why, like in our video, we suggested kind of short-circuiting as many steps as possible, so they just have very little to do to get onto the session with you. And at least with my clients, I found that when we do that and they get it, then it kind of becomes the new routine. But yeah, establishing that initial understanding can be tough. Scott, Bass.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I really appreciate and especially want to. I've been thrilled with some of these ideas and echo a lot of what Neil said. One of my questions about engagement. I mean, you can't engage if you don't get folks in the door, and I work with groups more than individuals by video. And there's so much, and if this is a topic for a different webinar, that's fine. But there's so much, I'm going to say information with air quotes, floating around out there about privacy and security with Zoom. And so one of my struggles has been to how much to say to try to reassure folks and how much to say that might actually instill fear and anxiety in folks. And because again, if they don't quote unquote come in the door, you can engage anyway.
I think that's a great point. I don't know if other folks have ideas on that. I think we have I think a HIPAA compliant account at El Futuro that we use, but even that's not completely safeguarded. So I think we have several measures that were recommended by Zoom that we've implemented, like the wait room is really helpful, turning off screen sharing, things like that. But yeah, I think there's no guarantees, unfortunately, with the way hackers are going at this.
Yeah, and one of the issues is actual safety and security, and the other is the perception of safety and security, and what to say so that folks have an honest and truthful perception of safety and security.
Yeah, I don't know, Molly or any other folks on the call, like what have you been telling your clients to put allay fears?
Yeah, I think it's a really sticky situation because we don't exactly know what's going on the Zoom end, and we've heard things. And they're making efforts to increase their security and to fix some of the end-to-end encryption concerns with the HIPAA compliant versions. One of the things that we do is we try to be very explicit about our limitations around safety, but say we are keeping a track of what's going on in the community, and if we need to migrate to another service, we will do that. But letting clients know that it's their choice to participate, and if they want to do another kind of service over the phone, or if we want to think strategically about that, we try to maintain that accessibility and to match people's level of comfort if we can. Now we're using Zoom as our primary platform, but I think of some things that are like, I would consider them bridge technologies. So if your clients typically communicate over FaceTime, could you have a couple sessions over FaceTime if that's something they're more comfortable with, and then migrate over to the technology that your agency is using? I think we need to think about the long term, and if Zoom isn't going to fix their technology concerns, we all need to have something in our back pocket. But connecting people to that HIPAA compliant technology that you might use continuing beyond this, I think is a really good opportunity to start getting comfortable and then migrating over to something that is really secure.
If I could jump in, another aspect of this is privacy. And on that Tuesday call, which was mostly about groups with SUD adults, it appears not to be uncommon to have one or two group members that are moving around while they're having the session. They're in their car, maybe they get out of their car, get back in their car, and so it came up that some guy was in his car and he was alone in his car. That was fine, but then he got out of his car and was walking into Walmart and still on the session. So the upshot of that was everybody should practice how to say to clients, we want to try to keep enforcing and respecting privacy during these shared sessions, and practice it in a way that you don't shame people, but that you appeal to what they would want and everybody else would want too. And I thought that was a really good point.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Glenn. Important to just even naming that, that you're trying to maintain that respect there, I think is really important. I'm conscious of the time. I wanted to maybe bring in the conversation to other modalities. So I know some folks are doing maybe family work. Some folks are even running groups. So I spoke with our group facilitator at El Futuro, and she's been able to run a few. She had some tips on how to do that, but I know that it can be pretty difficult because I think all of the problems that we're having with one-to-one people get kind of exponentially grow when you're talking about running a group. Some of the things she suggested were having someone who's kind of a tech person and running it kind of like a webinar, kind of like what we're doing today, and having a presentation that can center people's attention, because you don't have that group leader at the front of a typical, like you do in a typical group. And then having that admin person being there 10 minutes before and 10 minutes after the group starts to troubleshoot any kind of tech issues while the group is still continuing to run. And those were things that she found particularly helpful. The group that she ran was on mindfulness, and she actually found that it lended itself pretty well because it requires teaching a lot of concepts, and so having the PowerPoint there with words on the screen can help to guide people along. But I wonder if other folks on the call have done family work, have ventured into telegroup work as well, and what you found helpful.
This is Lynn from El Futuro. I can share, I've been doing TFCBT with a client, and on a conjoint session, so it wasn't the full family, but it was the caregiver and the kid. And I can tell you that that a lot of the foundation of the work was basically kind of thinking what would work in a two-dimensional kind of space, but also using a lot of humor and just, you know, in terms of that first initial, okay, we got to work together so I can see you both on the screen. And so you might need to sit a little closer or a little farther. And so just being willing to actually talk about this is what I need to see in order to know that we're all engaged, and having some humor as you work through some of those, just those logistical issues of getting both people on the screen.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah.
And if I might, this is Scott again. I usually am quiet in these kinds of meetings, but most of my use of Zoom has, and this kind of thing has been with groups. And I was really, really skeptical. And I've been surprised at a little more intimacy almost that's possible, because folks are just looking at their faces, and there's not a whole room full of things. And certainly using screen sharing, and I've certainly done a lot more presenting material for folks to react to or respond to that I might have normally done in an in-person group. Those are a few things, but I was really, again, skeptical, but pleasantly surprised at how well it has worked with some groups.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm curious, Scott or others, about like how the dynamics play out, because you know you envision a group being everyone coming together in a room, and that's happening in a different kind of way. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
I found one of the biggest obstacles has been folks talking on top of each other. But again, with larger groups, using the hand raising function rather than muting everybody and using hand raising function, to me is not ideal, but for larger groups, it seems helpful. For smaller groups, I've tended to keep folks unmuted unless they had background noise. If there's a dog barking in the background, I'll try to figure out who that is and mute them for the needed time. So just a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I think our group leader had everyone unmuted, but it was a 4-person group, and she was like, "Yeah, if I had 10 or 12, like that might get a bit difficult, especially with families running around."
And sorry, I'm much more talkative today than usual. I've also found I've had some groups where there were folks. Initially, I was like, everybody's face needs to be seen, so folks know who's in the room. And then I retreated to, okay, there are some folks who don't want their face to be seen because like they haven't showered, they're wearing a hat or whatever, like I am today. or I work with a lot of loved ones of homicide victims who might be, severely depressed and don't want their face seen. But I actually found some folks who were willing to participate via chat who were not willing to even say anything out loud. Mm-hmm. And again, that was I had initially ruled out that option, but I'm so glad that I let that fly, because someone literally said, I can't talk, but here's what I'd like to say. And because she was chatting to everyone, I just would read those chats out, her comments out loud. So
that's a really cool. I think it's good to be flexible like that. And we've even found that in our webinars and things like some of our programming, not necessarily just therapy. Some people just don't feel comfortable. I'm looking at the many people who are muted on this call maybe and are not turning their video on. We respect that, and we're just happy to have you. But yeah, we need to accommodate for different people's needs. Conscious of the time, I think we have a little bit more time. Curious about folks we haven't heard from on the call so far today. Sharing, and I think we can just open up to any kind of experiences that you've had with teletherapy.
I have a question. This is Gloria. I just wanted to know if anybody has used the services of an interpreter, and how has that been?
Hi, this is Kenny with Vecinos, and when I'm doing therapy, I don't need an interpreter, but for our medical providers doing telehealth, they have used our outreach workers for interpretation. And I think it's very similar to a typical appointment. If the provider and your clientele is used to that interpretation, the telehealth doesn't add a whole lot of barriers to that. But if they're not used to the interpretation and they're not used to the telehealth, I would imagine that could create some more difficult.
This is Regina. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so just last week I used an interpreter. However, when you get an interpreter, you have to have a code, and then when you get them, they're on the phone. When we have our Microsoft Teams type video conference, they're not on that. So I had to actually kind of use the phone, turn the speaker on, and have it up high volume so that the parent can hear. And of course, at times there were echoes. So that was kind of hard to try to get the interpreter to hear the conversation that was going on, because they weren't actually in the meeting. But it lasted about 30 minutes. And of course I couldn't interpret what he was saying because I don't speak that language. However, and mom could hear, she would say, then he would tell me what she was saying. But it was kind of difficult because he wasn't actually in with an email address, but actually on the phone, because we got to get him through a code.
Thank you, Regina. Yeah, that can be really tough. And I know my partner has used three-way calls for interpreters, but again, the connectivity is not always the best.
Mm-hmm.
Conscious of the time, I think we're just about out of time. So just wanted to, just seeing a few questions here. So Maria Aversa, I'd like to know who can train with features on Zoom, such as the whiteboard. Pretty sure they probably have tutorials on them, but we can try to point you in that direction. But I think either you just YouTube generally, if you search Zoom whiteboard, I'm sure they'll have pretty easy to follow tutorials. But really it's just as simple as when you're hosting the meeting, you hit share, and then one of the share options is whiteboard, and then it's like Microsoft Paint. But yeah. Thank you all so much for joining us today, for the lively conversation, for all your ideas. It's so encouraging. We were taking bets with my tech our project manager, Sophia Edelman, earlier, how many people are we going to get on the call? And she was like 30. I said, yeah, let's go for 40. We had like 68 at one point, or 61, something like that. So super encouraging to see you all here, and for joining us. If you want to continue to be engaged, we are having our ECHO series that is starting tomorrow. So this is a teleconsultation series where we discuss cases and present didactics on Latinx mental health specifically. So it'll be starting tomorrow from 12 to 1. You can either get onto our Latino Mental Health Network at la-mesita.mn.co. Sophia, if you can type that into the chat for folks. Or go to our El Futuro website under La Mesita in the tabs, and you can find all of our programming there to get registered. We offer free CEUs for it. It's really a great place to engage, and we're really excited to hear how folks are treating cases. This session, we do it on series based on diagnoses. Right now we're focusing on behavioral disorders and ODD disorders. So if you have the time, tomorrow from 12 to 1, we'll do it every Friday, 12 to 1. We'd love for you all to join us in those discussions. But with that, I want to say thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay sane, stay active. And be on the lookout for another communication around. We hope to have a few more of these info sessions as we remain in quarantine together. All right, thanks everyone. Take care.
All right, thank you.